Insight now into all of this. We're pleased to be joined tonight by the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Senator, thanks for being here.
Bret, glad to be here.
You heard the Attorney General and his concerns about the president's tweeting, saying it's making it impossible for him to do his job. Your reaction to that?
Yeah, my reaction is the president made a great choice when he picked Bill Barr to be Attorney General. I think the president should listen to his advice.
So you have a problem with the president's tweeting as well?
I think that if the Attorney General says it's getting in the way of doing his job, maybe the president should listen to the Attorney General.
So do you think the tweet about his opinion on the Roger Stone sentencing recommendations is inappropriate political interference?
Well, the Attorney General has said it's making it difficult for him to do his job. I think the president ought to listen to the Attorney General, who's an outstanding law enforcement officer. He's a top person in the country. The president made a wise selection in picking Bill Barr. I think I ought to listen to him.
You value precedent. Are you concerned at all that President Trump, in his mind, has somehow politicized the Department of Justice, or this has become the new normal for him?
Well, I hate to keep saying the same thing.
Okay, I got you.
Again, but
listen to the Attorney General.
Yeah,
but I'm talking about you as Senate Majority Leader.
He's picked. Well, I think the Attorney General knows what he's talking about. I'm not the Attorney General, but I have confidence in Bill Barr. I think he's doing a good job, and I think he's told the president this is not helpful, making it difficult for him to do his job. I think the president ought to listen to him.
Along those same lines, Senator Susan Collins originally said that she voted the way she voted in the impeachment trial because she thought that the president will have learned from this process. She then kind of scaled that back a little bit. And take a listen.
I would hope that he would not do it again.
Why do you have that feeling that he has changed, that he learned a lesson?
Well, I may not be correct on that. It's more aspirational on my part.
What lesson did you learn from impeachment?
That the Democrats are crooked. They've got a lot of crooked things going. That they're vicious. That they shouldn't have brought impeachment. And that my poll numbers are 10 points higher.
So do you think the president was chastened by the process at all, or did you ever expect him to be?
Well, Senator Collins can speak for herself. I'll give you my opinion, which was that this would make impeachment more likely to be a routine matter. And this is something the Federalist Papers and the founders made clear they didn't want to happen. And the fact that they're now mentioning the word impeachment again in connection with the Attorney General only proves my point. I think the reason we got a solid vote against impeachment in the Senate was that almost all of my members, if not all of them, maybe with one exception, felt that this was not an impeachable offense. And the founders didn't want the House to constantly be doing impeachment resolutions because they had a policy difference or didn't like somebody. And I think it's pretty clear the House Democrats just don't like the president.
Do you think Senator Collins and her explanation hurt her chances for re-election?
I think Senator Collins, is going to be reelected. I think she can handle this. She doesn't need any advice from me about what to say. I'm happy to speak for myself.
Steve Bannon in the Washington Post writes about the president. He is mad, and he should be mad. The Democrats and the media wasted 3 years of the nation's time on a witch hunt. Now he understands how to use the full powers of the presidency. The pearl clutchers better get used to it. So in other words, do you think more is coming down the pipe from the White House?
I don't know. The president is different, as we all know. The fact that he is different is awfully attractive to a whole lot of Americans. That's how he got elected the first time. And look, I think we're going to have an election this November. That was the other argument against impeachment. The American people are going to make this decision, or the Senate. And I think it's important to remind your viewers that not only would the president have been removed from office, he would have been prevented from running this November. So in effect, the Senate would have been determining who the Republican nominee for president was. Totally unacceptable.
You had a vote today, War Powers Act. Here's the Senate Minority Leader.
If this is purely an attempt to embarrass the president, well, it's going to be a bipartisan one. We need to stop pretending as if both sides of the aisle aren't concerned about the president having too much leeway over the matters of war and peace.
Well, you had 8 Republicans vote with the Democrats on this War Powers resolution. Your reaction to that, and is there any consequence for those Republicans? We'll put them up on the screen.
Well, no consequence. But the War Powers Act, which, by the way, every president has felt was unconstitutional, sought to put a 60-day clock on a combat mission. Taking out Soleimani was not like going to war. It was not the Vietnam War. Soleimani's strike took maybe 60 seconds. The War Powers Act is about 60 days. A completely inappropriate response to the ability of any president to respond to emergencies. And that has been done over and over again by presidents going back all the way to the beginning.
Wasn't there an amendment saying the Soleimani strike was okay, but if you do some full-scale action, you got to come to Congress?
Well, I think the fundamental point here was, let me just contrast this with the way I handled President Obama's killing of Osama bin Laden. I was not called in advance. I'm a part of the Gang of Eight. I was not offended. I got called the next day. I said, congratulations on taking out this terrorist. And I sent out a public statement congratulating President Obama for doing something important. If President Obama had taken out Soleimani, I guarantee you there wouldn't have been a Democrat around who wouldn't have said, great job.
We saw what the president said about Mitt Romney and his vote on impeachment. You're saying that these 8 Republicans are not going to feel that blowback either?
Yeah, we don't have a doghouse in the Senate. I disagreed with him. I think that this should not have triggered the War Powers Act. I think the president was entirely within his authorities to take out Soleimani. I wish we'd done it years ago.
All right, let's talk politics. Your name comes up on the trail quite a bit. Take a listen.
Protect from gun violence, to raise wages. Trouble is, none of it can get past Mitch McConnell's Senate.
We have a second thing we better be working hard on and thinking about, and that is take back the Senate and put Mitch McConnell out of a job.
Democrats say there are 395 House bills that passed the House and have been kind of rejected or sitting in the Senate. Is that true, number one? And two, can anything get moved forward?
Well, it is true. They've been on full left-wing parade over there, trotting out all of their left-wing solutions that are going to be issues in the fall campaign. They're right. We're not going to pass those. We have divided government, and when you have divided government, Bret, you have to work on things you can agree on. And there are some things we can agree on. We agreed on government spending. We agreed on the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement. We're probably going to be able to reach an agreement on an infrastructure bill, a parks bill.
A bipartisan infrastructure bill.
Yeah. Now, it may not be a big bill because that would require dealing with the revenue sources that both sides are nervous about raising the gas tax, which is a regressive tax on low-income people. We also have some important environmental issues we're going to be able to agree on. So it's not that we're not doing anything. It's that we're not doing what the House Democrats and these candidates for president on the Democratic ticket want to do.
Well, what about prescription drugs? That's a big one.
We're wrestling with that. That's a very challenging. There are differences on both sides about how to get at that, and I think there's a chance we may be able to legislate on that.
Possibly before the end of this Congress?
Yeah.
If a Supreme Court seat were to open up before the November election, would you hold that seat open, like you did for Merrick Garland, that rule, to let voters decide which presidential candidate should pick the next justice?
Let me remind you what I said in 2016. I said you'd have to go back to the 1880s to find the last time a vacancy on the Supreme Court occurring during a presidential election year was confirmed by a Senate of a different party than the president. That was the situation in 2016. That would not be the situation in 2020. I'm not aware of any vacancy, but if you're asking me a hypothetical about whether this Republican Senate would confirm a member of the Supreme Court to a vacancy that created this year.
Before November?
Yeah, we would fill it.
And wouldn't you hear howls?
I would, but I'd also remind everybody of what I just told you, which is the Senate is in the same party as the President of the United States. And in that situation, we would confirm.
Will there be any judicial vacancies left unfilled?
I hope not.
Before the end of this Congress?
I hope not.
You're kind of moving them through?
Yes.
Do you risk criticism if you do the judges, but you don't get those other big things done, like prescription drugs, infrastructure, that you're kind of only doing judges?
Listen, I risk criticism every day.
Yeah.
You know, my job is to try to set the priorities. I have felt the judiciary was our most important responsibility. We've done now 51 circuit judges in 3 years. It took President Obama to do 8 years to do 55. I think changing the court system, putting in place men and women who believe that their job is to actually interpret the laws as written, is the most important long-term thing we can do for the country. And yes, it's my top priority.
Last thing, as you look at the Democratic race right now, a lot of angst on the Democratic side about Bernie Sanders versus whatever you want to say, a centrist or moderate role. What would it do to the country, do you think, if it was a President Bernie Sanders, if he was elected over President Trump in November, if he's the nominee?
Well, you got to worry about a nominee who is so attracted to the old Soviet Union years ago that he and his wife went on a honeymoon to Moscow during the Cold War. He's the real deal. But what bothers me more is all the rest of them sound very similar. They just don't describe themselves as socialists. Some of them call themselves moderates. If the definition of a moderate in the Democratic presidential primaries these days is they're not for Medicare for all, but they're for the public option. The public option means there'll only be one insurance company pretty soon. So you're all headed in the same direction, socialized medicine. I think they're all taking far left positions. And even though Bernie Sanders gets some credit for truth in labeling, they all, I think, are headed in the same direction.
But you have to have an answer for that health care attack, right? I mean, that is coming up time and time again in Iowa, New Hampshire, and there is not a Republican answer yet, is there? On
well, you mean on prescription drugs?
No, I'm saying overall. I mean, you're fighting in court against Obamacare and against pre-existing conditions, yet the president on the State of the Union says he's going to fight for pre-existing conditions all the time. So there's a dichotomy and not a way forward yet.
Look, let's put it this way. You saw the Democrats couldn't even put on a caucus in Iowa. I don't think the country would be better off to put them in charge of our health care.
Senator, we always appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.